So I wasn't sure if I should do a video on this, but here goes. So it's the end of July 2020, and recently my car broke down, but not in a regular way a car breaks down. My car broke down in a really weird, really kind of what mechanics and what even the dealerships call, it was a catastrophic failure. So my car, the catastrophic failure was that it would not start. So long story short, let me just say this is not a technical video, but if there's anyone who happens to find this video because you have the same problem, I'll let you know once I edit this at what point you should kind of go to the technical part. It'll be semi-technical, so you can get some advice, because I do think that I've got some unique perspectives and some things to share that no other video shows you how to when it comes to fixing this problem. So those who know me, yes, my favorite brand, the brand that I always buy and I'm always loyal to, Mercedes. I believe that other car companies have at this point caught up, but it all boils down to this electronic steering lock, because once upon a time Mercedes was, I believe, the pioneer of this when they came out with this particular type key. And it was really all about anti-theft, and virtually there's no way to steal a Mercedes by starting it these days, ever since the mid to late 90s. This stupid little motor, a $10 motor in the steering column, which is part of the electronic steering lock and part of the entire anti-theft system. The stupid little thing breaks after time, and this is really what causes the whole problem. This stupid little motor, which you can find on the internet, it's literally like $10 to $12 depending on who you buy it from. It's found in toys, it's found in lots of different things. They put this damn thing in 2008 to 2014 Mercedes C and E classes. So this thing will eventually fail, and I knew it was going to fail, but I just wasn't sure when. But I knew it was going to happen at some point because I know my car. It's really the only brand that I drive for the past 10, 12 years, and I just, every 4 or 5 years I just replace my car with the same, brand. So the fact that mine broke at 127,000 miles, my car's mainly, it's highway miles, and I really maintain my car really, really well. I either work on it myself sometimes when I can, or the only person who really touches my car is a private mechanic that I've had for literally over 20 years at this point. The only person or entity that can really do this job for you, to do it the right way, to bring it back to the original, is really the dealer. And the dealer charges $2,000 for this. $2,000 just to get your electronic steering lock unlocked again and put a new motor in. Now they say that that little box is not serviceable, but for those of you who want to stick around this video a little later, I'll tell you that it definitely is serviceable and how I basically figured all this out. So that's insane money. I mean, it's not as though I don't have $2,000 to fix my car. I do, but I'm not paying $2,000 to get my car to start again because of an electronic steering lock. That I won't do. I almost considered going to the dealership that I always buy my cars from, and there was a 2017 that I saw that was pretty nice. It was fairly reasonable price, and I was going to trade this car in for that, but I wound up not doing that. Still like my car, and I think it's a pretty nice car. I think it's a pretty sweet car, and I still want to keep it for a couple of years. And again, I'll be damned if I'm going to spend $2,000 when I know it's a $10 issue. A $10 issue that if you put your work into it, if you put your labor into it, you can really get that thing to work again, and you can really make it work perfectly the way it's supposed to work. It's not like, jerry-rigged or anything like that. It can work the right way, and you could feel really good about it, by the way. This took me about 3 weeks to finally get it fixed. It's not as though I worked on it every day for 3 weeks. My car is here in New Jersey. Still spend a little bit of time in New Jersey. I live in New York, so, I would go back to my apartment for, a week, 8-9 days, and not even really kind of, do anything at all. Then I'd come back to Jersey, work on it for 2 days straight, work on it all weekend, and that kind of thing. Still, I've always owned a car, and the fact that my car was grounded for 3.5 weeks was a little bit unsettling, but it was a lot of hard work. And one of the things that I'll say is it's interesting what you learn about yourself when you challenge yourself on things that you've never done before. You don't have any experience, but I did my research on the internet. I really thought about this. I thought it through. I organized everything. I figured out what parts I needed, what tools I needed, and all that stuff. And then, of course, I got the $10 motor from Amazon, and I can't believe it, but it actually worked. And you can feel really good about that. It's not just about fixing your car. I mean, you know what? But in terms of fixing a car, I feel like I could rebuild the whole damn engine if I needed to at this point. I mean, I know I'm being a little bit cocky about that, but it's a pretty damn good feeling when you have this insanely complicated problem that, you know, immobilizes your car, and you figure it out by yourself. And I did all of this literally by myself. Not a single person helped me at all. I had to literally take out the entire steering column. I had to take off like half the dashboard. I even took out the gas pedal, for God's sakes. For things that you either want to do or you need to do and you've never done it before, you know, try to challenge yourself. And you know, if it works out, I got to tell you, you know, you'll really feel good about that. You really will. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the technical stuff, and this is really not that technical. So there's the best video that I saw, which is a 2-part video. It's kind of long, but it's really worth it. I think his name is Mikey's blog, something like that. So, you know, I put the link for you as well in the description of this. So it's a pretty good video, so watch that. But there's a couple of things that I don't really agree with, and I don't really think that he really either tells you the whole truth or he on one thing and then it kind of goes away. So whatever, I'm not here to criticize him, but that really is a good video. So that's a compliment, it's not a criticism. So the things that I wanted to say that it doesn't seem that any video tells you. So my steering column unfortunately failed in the lock position, not the unlock position. So as that guy on Mikey's blogs tells you, yeah, if it fails in the lock position, you can't do what he did, which is just basically remove those 4 bolts of the steering column and then kind of wiggle it around and maneuver it so you can kind of get your hand all the way back there and reach it, and by feel and all that stuff. Take out the entire steering column, not just loosen the steering column and drop it. I had to take the entire steering column out. It was one hell of a job. So if you need to take out the entire steering column like I did and literally remove it and take it out of the car, it's not actually 4 bolts, it's 5 bolts. It's the 4 bolts that people in the videos talk, you know, tell you about. But then there's another bolt, and I wish I knew the name of it, but it's a bolt that basically is all the way where the steering column connects to, I believe some people call it a pinch clamp. It is a really solid piece of metal, and it's a clamp where there is one, I think I used a Torx 40. Some people say Torx 45, but a Torx 40 worked for me. It's really, really tight. It's got a little bit of green paint from the factory, you know, to where it needs to be aligned and all that stuff. So you have to take that out, and then I believe it's called the spline, so that way you can basically pull the spline out and you can pull the entire steering column out. The other thing that I wanted to quickly mention, so for me, I've got the motorized steering wheel where you've got the telescoping and tilt, you know, electronic. It's not the manual. So if you have the manual steering column, yes, you can pull it out of the opening, but if you have the power column like I do, you cannot pull it out because it's got 2 motors on it. It's got one motor separate just for the tilt, it's got another motor just for the telescoping, and it's ridiculous. So what I had to do, and I really tried like crazy, I just couldn't get it out even from the bottom, which is really the only way to do it. So you also have to remove the gas pedal. Then kind of, you know, maneuver it around on the floor there, and then you can eventually pull the whole damn thing literally out of the car. And then, you know, it's so hot right now these days, so I took it into my parents' house and worked on it in the air conditioning. So that's one thing I wanted to say. Another thing that I wanted to say, oh, and by the way, when you put that spline back together, it's really important that you do it the right way. So that spline has 3 different metal indications on it, and each of those metal indications are a different size, so it can only go back in one way. Don't try to just ram it in there and shove it in there. You're going to mess things up. You have to really make sure that you align it correctly. I was on my back so many times for 3.5 weeks underneath the driver's side dashboard that, you know, it was like ridiculous. So I know there isn't that much room in there, and there isn't that much room to see. You have your flashlight, but still it's a little bit tricky, but you have to just have patience and make sure you put it back in there correctly. And then that 5th, you know, that Torx 40 or Torx 45 bolt, really make sure that you put it back in there super incredibly tight. Put a little bit of Loctite or Permatex. As I said before, my motor failed in the lock position. You'll see a lot of videos on YouTube where people cut that bolt that holds that 13mm nut. Don't do that. You don't need to do that. I think that that's a really not such a great way to do it. There's better ways to do it. So what I did was I actually drilled a 1/8 inch hole on the side near one of those pinholes. And if you do it in the right location, right where that parting line is, just, you know, do it really slowly, because obviously you don't want to drill too far in and ruin that plastic gear. But if you drill a 1/8 inch hole and just drill through that, and then literally take a pick and just go clockwise slowly and start to turn that gear, then you will finally get that, you know, that bolt with that 13 mm that, you know, kind of has to, it's got that spring on it that, you know, needs to push in, which means it's in the unlock position. You can actually get that to release itself. And what you haven't done is that you haven't sawed off a bolt and gone through all that trouble, and I think that that's a lot more trouble than drilling a 1/8 inch hole. And the other thing is, by the way, that when you know, if you don't saw off that bolt, you don't have to try to re-weld a new bolt or anything like that. I didn't use an emulator. I put the original back together. The other thing is, by the way, I bought that tool. The tool claims to be able to open those 4 pins that it's not even screws. You know, some people say go counterclockwise, some people say clockwise. I tried. I couldn't get it out. I couldn't even get one of those damn things out. So I wound up drilling them out. Use a 1/16 inch drill bit. If you use a 1/16, you actually won't even ruin the pins. Just drill in really softly and then drill out, and the pin will actually come out nice and smooth and easy. There was one that unfortunately didn't even work for me, so I just had to truly drill the thing out. Drill. You open the motor up, you know, once you unscrew the PCB, the board, and you pull out that old motor, which I'm going to assume is going to be kind of filled with black dust, but that's because, you know, all the brushes in that motor are destroyed. So when you take out that old motor, just make sure everything is nice and clean, and then make sure you grease the gear, the plastic gear. Make sure you grease the motor, grease that plastic lever, that black lever, grease that metal piece that kind of goes up and down, that is controlled by that black plastic lever, which is of course controlled by the gear, and the gear of course is controlled by the motor. So make sure that you do all that, because you don't want to do all this stuff and then have, you know, you don't want to put these parts back in without greasing it. So just make sure that you do that. Videos on YouTube where they show you that, you know, they show you how to replace the motor and they're not doing the grease, so that's not a good thing. The other thing is, so as this guy Mikey from Mikey's Blogs talks about, which he's really correct, if you, like me, like many, if your motor failed in the lock position, he's actually right. When you put everything back together and then you plug it back in, you might be in jeopardy of frying the entire chip. So you did all that work for nothing. So how do you kind of get around that? Well, what I did, and I really thought about this, so this is not only doing, but it's also thinking and planning. So what I did to get around that, and it worked for me, and hopefully it'll work for you too, so you don't burn that chip and you don't have to wind up going to the dealer. If your motor failed in the locked position, when you close up the box, close the box up and put everything back together in the locked position. You might be thinking, well, how the hell am I going to put it back together in the locked position, because I can't even get it back into the steering column in the locked position. So put it back together in the locked position, put that 13 mm nut back on the bolt, and then go to your car and plug the unit back in. And you want to do that anyway to make sure, you know, to test everything before you put the whole thing back together. So just take the box, don't put it in the steering column yet. You can't, because again, I'm advising you, if your motor failed in the lock position, put it back in the lock position, get back into your car and turn on the ignition, and hopefully it's going to unlock. So in other words, if it failed in the locked position, you want to repair it and put it back together in the locked position. If it failed in the unlocked position, you want to put it back together and assemble it in the unlocked position. I didn't need a new EIS, by the way. The only thing that was my problem was the ESL. So when you put it back together, again, put it back in the locked position and let your key do the unlocking. So then the computer doesn't, you know, fry that chip. The computer, you know, it's all kind of still synced the right way. It was locked before, now it's still locked. You're using your key and it unlocks anyway you get it. So then when you want to take it back to the steering column, make sure you constantly are, you know, taking the battery negative terminal off, put it back into the steering column. Don't do it you know, kind of reverse polarity, so to speak, polarity in a relative sense. Well, hopefully if it all works for you, when you put everything back together, and I know you're doing it the right way with the battery terminal off, negative terminal off. So a lot of people are saying, well, the one thing that you have to deal with is that your airbag light will be on, and your airbag light will definitely be on, but I actually thought of this and it worked for me. I hope I didn't just get lucky and I did something really, really stupid. I took the fuse out before I even took off the negative terminal. And then, of course, when I started everything up and the electronic steering lock, the new motor that I put in worked, then I basically went and put the fuse back in for the airbag, and there was no airbag light. So I didn't even, you know, I have a private mechanic. I didn't even have to go to my private mechanic to have the airbag light reset because I don't have a scanner. The reason why I did that was because when I pulled out the airbag and unclipped the, you know, the electronics for the airbag, the fuse was already out. So when I put the whole thing back together and I put the negative battery terminal back on, it's not as though the car said, hey, wait a minute, this airbag was removed and now it got put back on. So that I didn't do anything stupid. I'm sure there's a lot of people on YouTube that know a hell of a lot more than I do. I just put in a lot of work on this, and that's why I'm pretty proud of it. So that's another little tip that I wanted to share with you. In all, so this is a job that is really complicated yet simple if you really put your mind to it, are up for the challenge, and you really kind of do all the planning, do the research, study, quote, and you can really do it too. And whether it's this or something else that you've never kind of taken on, you take it on, you do it all by yourself, and you actually feel pretty good about it.